They came from Chicago in 1980 and performed the fine art of improvisation, an art which at that time, in New York City at least, had few followers. Over the next 5 years, Chicago City Limits would change the face of comedy in New York City. Dozens of new improv groups sprung up every year, and over the next few decades, the various performers who appeared under the CCL banner starred in over 10,000 shows. Still, the real impact of the original CCL improvisers wasn't in the number of shows they did, it was in how they influenced what came afterwards. The Upright Citizens Brigade, the Pit, and other improv groups may have followed with more hoopla, but none would have been possible without the groundbreaking work of Chicago City Limits, a special group in a special time.
I know what's been going on. You've been coming down here pretending to feed the pigeons Valium-laced breadcrumbs. And really, you've been meeting her, haven't you?
Her? By her you mean Marianne?
No, I...
Oh, well, I'm certainly no name Marianne.
Though they're called the Chicago City Limits, they've been poking fun at the world from the Jan Hus Church in New York since 1982.
Forget a horn, you can work anywhere. Just try this. Look, Bo Derek on acid. Don't give me shit.
It's the art of taking suggestions from an audience and making things up on the spot.
This is the house of our Lord. Do you understand that, Zuckerman? Then quiet.
I got a windburn.
We'd like to introduce you to some young performers who are on their way up, beginning with the improvisational group called Chicago City Limits.
Without a Jarvik 7, you'd probably be in heaven with Kierkegaard and Sartre.
Wow.
Why the existential when you can have potential with an artificial heart?
But we have a sneak peek thanks to some funny folks at Chicago City Limits.
Since I converted, I guess we won't have any more pork around the house.
Why not?
Well, I guess we can.
One thing is certain, however. Chicago City Limits is an intelligent bunch of comedic nuts whose repertory is fresh and electric. They are the best in improvisational theater.
My potato is bad.
Bad potato! Bad, bad, bad!
Now, if that potato should bother either of you anymore, just let me know.
I'm kinda mad, kinda pissed at this mister, at this miss. She's hanging up in a baby tonight. I tell you, baby, I did something not right. Yeah, she's got mine, and it's not yours. She doesn't have one on the floor for you. No matter what you do. Sydney, I hope you got a phone, 'cause from now on you're all alone. I'm kinda mad, kinda pissed at this mister, at this miss. She's hanging up in a baby tonight. I tell you, baby, I did something not right. Yeah, she's got mine, and it's not yours. She doesn't have one on the floor for you.
word yes is such a simple thing to do, yet most people, when confronted with the unknown, will say no. That's the safer route. When you say no, you stop things from happening. When you say yes, you will travel into a new world. When you say yes and, you are joining forces with someone else. Your idea plus my idea equals our idea. It is called yes-anding and is the bedrock on which improvisation is built.
I started, when I first got to LA, when I was 19 or so, I started taking improv classes there. And I thought that that's what improv was. I thought that improv was basically something you do to showcase yourself, to get a role in a sitcom. When I saw Chicago City Limits, it was entirely different. It was less about comedy and more about theater. I mean, the choices that were being made and the support system, the whole yes-anding and the building on each other's ideas. So when I saw CCL and they saw them do these scenes, these improvised scenes that actually built into like real scenes, beginning, middles, and ends. There were arcs, there were character arcs. It was, in these little improvs. It was remarkable.
I remember when I used to love you. Just ain't no more.
Oh, yeah? Hello. There she is. Why don't you tell her?
Hi, Suzette. Your mama and I, well, we done rid each other out. See, it looks like, little girl, your mama and I are gonna head for DIVORCE.
Baby, you're gonna be with me, right? Tell me you're gonna be with me, baby. Come over here.
Freeze! Well, the news that her parents are having a divorce is going to have an effect on this woman. How is she going to react? Nervous breakdown. Nervous breakdown and ecstatic. We heard both. We'll combine those. And in what playwright or theater form? Shakespeare. Shakespeare.
I swooned. Oh, Mother, that isn't so. Oh, please, Mother, as the crow just flying to summer morning, please tell me it is not so.
It is I, the royal physician.
Yes. Oh, I do feel faint, oh, dear Mother.
This I say in most emphatic. Her nerves have broken and she is ecstatic.
Mother, please, hold my hand. No, I do not believe that thou and Father are separating.
She has the divorce malady.
Doctor!
The symptoms are rolling on a couch.
The name Chicago City Limits probably can be confused with Second City, but what we were trying to do was taking the name of the city where improvisation was born.
Modern improvisation started in Illinois in 1955 when students from the University of Chicago began performing improvised skits from their own scenarios. This group developed into the Compass Players and later into Second City, from which many other improv groups are descended. In the near vacuum of political humor in the early 1960s, Second City's off-the-cuff comedy was as unusual for its material as it was for its methods.
First time I saw improvisation was at Second City in Chicago, Illinois in the 1970s. I'm aging myself, but that's the truth. And I went to Second City and saw the show and absolutely, positively fell in love. I said, this art form was meant for me. This is what I wanted.
But with improvisation, it is a magic trick because you're starting seemingly with nothing. They don't realize the suggestions are the gifts, not the obstacles. And the experience of seeing something born out of nothing is a very magical experience, I think.
When discussing Chicago City Limits, the first thing to talk about is George Tedisco. Living in Chicago with his wife and child, the Brooklyn-born entrepreneur owned a brownstone and ran a New York-style pizzeria called Giorgio's Pizza Amore. But he dreamed of something greater. He dreamed of forming a top-notch improv group that would rival the mighty Second City.
George was the dreamer. He was the blue sky guy. He was, he was a Walt Disney. He was a man with visions and dreams.
Here's a guy who was absolutely the epitome of not taking no for an answer. And when you see somebody do that, they're not always successful, and he wasn't always successful. But man, there was nobody more driven than he was.
Improv groups kind of, they're born of frustration, desperation, and ambition. Those three chemicals kind of fuse together in a mix of sweat and explode into, oh, we've got a group, come see our show.
This is Christopher Oyen in the 1970s. He was born and raised in Chicago, and at the age of 20, he was hired by the Second City as a stage manager and assistant director of the troupe's national touring company.
When I wasn't on the road with the touring company, I was seating people, washing dishes, making sandwiches, tending bar, and cleaning the theater sometimes, and hanging around workshops.
It was through those classes that he met George Tedisco and Sandy Smith, two 20-somethings who were nuts about improv. George had performed with one group, Al's Improvisational Company, and with Sandy he had appeared at a show staged by the short-lived Snapshots. The experience taught George a lesson. He would not appear in a group again unless he was its leader.
But what about now, how the Chicago City Limits started? Now, you've got 7 members in your company now.
Right.
And did you start out with the same people, or are you?
No.
What?
People stay with us a year, they fight, and then they leave. That's how it normally goes.
What happens in all the improv workshops, I guess, is that students get together and they'll form a group, and the group will do 2 or 3 shows, and somebody will fight, and then the group breaks up, and there's maybe 2 people from that group that find somebody else, and that process can sort of evolves continually. That's kind of how Chicago City Limits developed.
All right, I went to see an improv group, and after the show, I talked to the director. And I said, I saw your ad here. I'd like to, see about an audition. And he was a little distracted. He said, here's my number. Call me tomorrow, right? The reason he was distracted is they had a meeting that night, and the group broke up. But he said, there's this guy named George, right? It was George Tedisco, all right? George Tedisco. And he gave me his number. So I called George out of the blue, and I said, hey, George, I hear you're looking for people for your improv group. And George was like, yeah, okay. Right. I had no idea how this guy get my number.
The group, consisting of Chris Oyen, Carol Schindler, Bill McLaughlin, Sandy Smith, John P. Redman, Suzanne Suzinski, made its debut on Labor Day 1977, and then appeared regularly at Sylvester's Pub.
It was a dive. It was a cop bar, actually. And many times after we had done our performance, the cops would come in and drink and everything, and every once in a while, they'd have target practice on the stage. And one time, George and Sandy nearly got caught in the crossfire.
So we're backstage talking, taking our time, and then all of a sudden, there's boom!
It was this wild and crazy bar. Very small, and the backstage was absolutely disgusting. And then Sylvester had this dog. It was a Doberman. It was this huge dog.
He ended up crapping all over the floor, and it wasn't us, it was the dog.
That became one of our regular haunts. And Sylvester's, which was on Lincoln Avenue, and this is early promotion. This is George had these bumper stickers.
George had this idea that we should perform in Las Vegas, so he and Sandy actually went out to Las Vegas to scout places to see where we could perform, and they actually booked us in this theater. I think it was called the Meadows Theater, and we were going to do a long run at this Meadows Theater. So we all got into a van from Chicago and drove out to Las Vegas and got to the theater, and the guy reneged on the deal. There was no deal. We were in Las Vegas, all of us, with nothing to do, so... But George, he went out and he found stuff for us to do.
Carol and I actually developed
a bit that we did called the Satin Dolls, which were these two, we'd done Vegas for a while, and we would come on stage and do these kind of, hey, how you doing? Great, so good, I'm singing.
We got to LA and we had a bomb experience. We bombed on stage. No, it was me and Suzanne Suzinski doing a scene, and it went absolutely nowhere. And we workshopped, and then we played the Ice House in Pasadena, and boom, we just knocked it out of the park.
The 1978 model found Sandy absent from the group.
So I was offered a job at the Meadows Playhouse to be an actress in residence.
Suzanne left the group in 1978 and became popular as the chart-topping singer Suzanne Palmer. After Angry Words with George, John Redman left the troupe. With these departures, the troupe was reduced to a trio. George had to beef up the ranks.
We started a group called Andy's Gang, and Andy knew George. So George came in one day to direct the group, and we did a couple of shows. And I was home one night, and I get a call from Chris, who was working with George, and said, well, we would like you to come and do a show with us. George had asked me to give you a call, blah, blah, blah. So there I was that night. I headed out to Cobart's Comedy Cove, spelled with K's. And I met George and Chris and Carol and Bill.
I was working as a comedian, a guitar comedian, at a club called Cobart's Comedy Cove, 3Ks, in Chicago. And I had just started. I was 21 years old. And there was also this improv group there called Chicago City Limits. And they would do their improvs. And I would do my little act with my funny songs.
Had a little lamb, her fleece was white as snow. Ha! Cow, now, brown cow, everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. Get those lambs in a circle. Had them off at the pass, Mary.
The owner of that club, Bill Cobart, said to me, hey, listen, the group wants to know if you're able to play music behind them for their scenes. And I said, well, sure, that sounds like fun. Why not? And then, so I started doing that. So that's how I started with them. Now, years later, what CCL told me is that Bill Cobart, the owner of the comedy club, had gone to them and said, hey, Rick wants to play music behind you. Would that be okay? If this is true, he matched us up together. Bill Cobart, you're responsible for everything I've done since.
So there we were performing in New York, and Suzanne decides she wants to leave the group because she's a singer. She's an excellent singer, and she had aspirations in that regard, and so she left. So we needed another woman. And, you know, we had Paul Zuckerman in the group, and he had come on when we were at Cobart's Comedy Cove, and he said, you know, I have a wife, and she's very, very talented. And so we met Linda Gelman, and he was right. She was very, very talented. She was a dancer, she was an actress, and she was funny. And we got to be very close.
You know, George said, you want to be in the company? I went, okay. And that's how that happened. Then soon after that, Paul and I had a party at our apartment in Chicago, and she and George came, and, you know, playing music, and people are dancing, and Carol comes up to me and she says, do you have any dance music, meaning disco? And I hated disco music, and I said, this is dance music.
Like, are you kidding? I'd rather eat glass and play any disco. But that was a funny thing, because Linda and I hit it off, and we have been best friends ever since. We just really clicked, and we liked each other, even though we were very different, you know.
How were you different?
Well, I was from the Midwest, and she was from New York. That's one. She was a dancer and an actor, and I was an improviser, you know. She was Jewish, and I was Catholic. She was short, and I was tall.
Hey, guess what?
What?
Guess who's going to the dance with Margaret Newberry?
Who?
Randy Stacy.
I can't believe they let him back in school after what he did.
I know. He called Sister Patrice a penguin.
Yeah, he shouldn't have written it on the blackboard, though.
I know. I think he's real cute, though. I wish he'd ask me to go to the dance.
Yeah, well, your father would never let you go with him.
Where to tell my father?
Mary Ann Burkles, you would lie to your father?
He lies to my mother.
George had his group, and consciously or unconsciously, he had cast it with people who were vastly different.
I was a fan of Chicago City Limits before I was in the group, while I was in the group, and after I was in the group. And the reason is because it was an unusual kind of group, and that everyone brought in a very unique set of skills. There were shared skills, but it wasn't like watching the same person repeated, 5 or 6 times. The unique skills and everyone's knowledge of everyone else's unique skills and ability to use that knowledge, employ that knowledge, is, to my mind, what made that concoction, work so well.
But when it came to doing the ensemble work, we all melded, and everybody, no matter how different we were as individuals, we would work together as one. And that was one of the things that made the group really special.
I would sit there, I was in the dark, playing the piano, just off to the side, but in the dark. And I thought, well, nobody can see me. And I would have a sandwich with me during the show. It was just, and he was like, well, that's distracting. He said, George, nobody can see me. I'm in the dark, So he came on in a scene with a sandwich and just did the scene, eating a sandwich, just eating it, and just gave me the message. You see how distracting this is? I never did it again. I was like, okay, point taken, point taken.
So we worked and worked and worked in Chicago, but then, George had said to us, look, we're not going to get anywhere in Chicago. They've got Second City. They don't need Chicago City Limits. And he was right. So he said, I want us to go to New York. And at first we all thought, what? We can't just drop everything and go to New York. And he said, why not? We said, okay. So we dropped, literally, we got into a van and we drove to New York.
You came to New York a year and a half ago.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Now, what was your strategy to break into the New York entertainment field? I mean,
we had no strategy.
When we first came to New York, we had nothing. We lived in a hotel room on 25th Street. 7 people in one hotel room. No sex.
It's called the Hotel Arlington. And if ever you need a pencil, you can get one at the Hotel Arlington. Now, it was a little hotel, which is famous, I think, for people who stay an hour, if you know what I mean.
I owe one of those, yeah.
And I think we were the longest residents in the history of the Arlington. We stayed 3 months.
And this guy who was opening a comedy club called Animal Crackers on 7th Avenue in the 50s hires us right away and wants us to open the room. And
it's called Animal Crackers. It was a place in the lobby of a hotel. We performed to 2 to 6 people a night.
Oh no! How was it? For how long?
We got like a 10-week contract to perform at this club, which they were supposedly opening, and they had a guy dressed up like Groucho Marx running around in the lobby. They had jugglers, and they had. I mean, this would have made Barnum look small.
And we were out there. We made our own flyers to attract people. We were trying to promote it and trying to do stuff for the first few weeks, thinking, yeah, we got to build word of mouth. Oh my God, they're going to fire us. One night I'm sitting at the bar, and the guy behind the bar was a kid going to Fordham Law School who really needed the job. And he was behind the bar, and this guy, and he wore a trench coat, and he was just evil, and he had a face that was a roadmap of misdeeds throughout his life, crags and that's what walked in with the fedora on. It's the middle of the summer, and this guy's wearing a trench coat, and he's got this bag, just like a rumpled up grocery bag that's rumpled up, and he's carrying it by the very top, and it looks like it's full, and he's carrying it, and he walks in, and he walks up to the bartender, and he puts it down, and he says, ring him $50,000. You had a very good night. And turns around and shuffles out. I looked at the kid behind the bar and I said, has that ever happened before? He goes, every night.
And I mean, the guys had guns in their pockets. But they liked us, you know, they liked us. We were the kids, we were the, hey, come on. And so I remember there was a manager there who, we were starving, literally. No money, starving in New York. So he would order a steak and stuff, and he would sit at the table and eat it. This was before it was showtime. And I would be looking at it, he'd go, you know what? I can't eat this. I can't eat it. You eat it. I go, nah, it's okay. He goes, no, you eat it, really. I said, no, thank you, I'm not going to. He goes, okay, then I'm throwing it away. I go, wait a minute, I'll eat it. But he used to take me around. He would go to strip clubs and collect his money. I remember once taking a walk with him, and he went into the strip club. I went in with him, and he went back to get the money, and I was talking to these women who were like completely naked, except for like a G-string, and they were like, oh, how you doing? Your friend, yeah. And I've never seen, you know, and I was a Midwestern girl, coming to New York and walking into this kind of a world. It was just unbelievable.
The guys that owned the animal crackers, the guys who set it up, owned Guys and Dolls A Go-Go around the corner, which was a strip joint, and evidently the hard action was getting laundered through animal crackers. So we realized who we were working for at that moment, about 3 weeks into our, oh my God, we've made it. We've got a long-term contract in a club in New York. Right?
They had made it to New York, but George was dissatisfied with the venues in which they performed.
Well, it was, I mean, you know, here we were in New York playing, you know, the Copacabana.
Was it what you expected it to be?
No. We were playing above the disco. You know, they have a disco now. You know, they really do. That Barry Manilow's not lying when he sings about that. And they have a disco below which kind of throbs throughout your whole show.
The group could have continued traveling from one club to another, but what George really wanted was a theater, and he found it one day, listed in the Village Voice.
There was an ad that said, you know, loft across from Manhattan Plaza. Well, I figured, you know, it was just a little loft, but I ended up calling up. It turned out to be what was at one time a little rock club. So, I mean, the thing had a stage and a little office. And it was just what we needed. So the whole cast got in there, jumped in, and we renovated in like 6 weeks, and we opened.
In June 1980, they opened their first show, Dented, and received tremendous reviews. They were called hilarious, beguiling, gifted, and blessed with wit and intelligence.
Famous actor was going to come to our show, but it was a flight up and he had a broken leg.
Who was that?
Who knows? He didn't come. I didn't care.
Oh.
George had done what he set out to do, create a highly regarded New York improv troupe with regular shows that included written sketch comedy as well as improvisations. With Rick Crome as musical director, CCL produced parodies of such popular films as The Wizard of Oz. Looking to increase interest in the troupe and also increase income, George decided to emulate Second City in other ways. Second City offered improv classes.
Well, actually, I feel that people have a lot of money to spend that they don't know what to do with. So, you know, why not get them in there, let them think they're funny, and take their money? I mean, I'm only kidding. People are going,
well, listen, I mean, if you throw it, if you want to cut it, it's up to you.
I got a copy of Backstage magazine, and I saw an ad for somebody who was teaching improv, stand-up, sketch comedy, everything under one roof. And it was this guy named Rusty Blitz and the Storefront Blitz, which was way west on 42nd Street. And he didn't really do any teaching. He kind of just put us, a lot of us, on stage and kept saying, invite all your friends, tell them to come by. And when all of our friends ran out after several months, it took a while because it was a large cast, he said to me, we're gonna end this show, but go see Chicago City Limits, they're the best. And I went to see Chicago City Limits and my jaw dropped because we were just standing on stage trying to be funny. It was awful. And then I saw this group where the scenes were connective and smart, and the show had many different things in it, political issues, social issues, and I was blown away, and within a couple of weeks I was in classes there.
I was doing the very beginnings of stand-up comedy in New York. I'd done some comedy prior to that skit comedy, and I thought, ooh, I'll get into stand-up. And I found that I was, you know, I grew up in the UK, so I was a bit stiff. So I thought, ooh, I'll do some improv, it'll loosen me up. You know, as many of us do, we start doing improv, we get hooked. So that's how I got into it. As you know, improv is about yes and. So she made me the little boy who lived down the lane. And she goes, you're the little boy who lives down the lane? And I went, no.
Having a touring company was another idea that George wanted to adopt from Second City. He thought that a road company could spread the group's name around the country and also be very lucrative.
Like, we did one tour where they actually had like a booking company booking the things, and we would do like 9 colleges in one tour.
College we did, I think in Indiana or something, they were very aggressively belligerent at us. And of course, you just don't do that to improvers who gave it back like tenfold. So they kind of hated us. And so we finished the show, we went outside to the van, and the van wouldn't start or run for like more than 15 feet. And we finally got it to a gas station, and the guy was like, your gas tank is filled with water. Like, somebody went and poured like water in our gas, so we had to have like the whole gas tank like emptied. Someone got us.
Spring Valley girl, she's the very best. Ahead of all the rest. And if you haven't guessed, the original princess.
Pick a newspaper. We would get all of the year-end reviews. I mean, one of the big things Ricky and I did was, in addition just to the ongoing everyday kind of things that would happen where you'd have a news item and you'd say, ooh, let's parody this song, let's parody that song, was that Rick and I would get together, even after he had stopped being the musical director. Rick and I would get together in second week of December, and we would start looking at the year in review, and we would write up the songs for our New Year's Eve show.
Paul, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you.
I guess there's no use.
Well, you do have one option.
I do? Sure.
When a man is getting sicker, 'cause he's got a bum ticker and he's laying on the cart. Don't just lay there dozing while your ventricles are closing, get an artificial heart.
Artificial heart?
Without a Jarvik 7, you'd probably be in heaven with Kierkegaard and Sartre.
Wow.
Why the existential when you can have potential with an artificial heart? Picture me, a battery, a reverse polarity. Soon I'm on TV, quelling fear.
And Sally Beer!
Woo! You can while away the hours, generating power. You got another start. You won't be disabled with a pair of jumper cables and an artificial heart.
Wah, wah, woo, woo. Boy? Yeah. Choo, choo. Wah, wah, woo, woo. Boy?
George employed 2 more elements that led Chicago City Limits to success. The first was music. Improvised music really wowed audiences, and CCL sang an improvised number in every show.
And, we'd have ideas like that and go like, that, let's do that.
Doesn't matter what kind of ID you use, the city will give you the traffic news. I got a wife who's really hot. In fact, I think she fools around a lot. To me, this is really no treat. I don't think she's very sweet. Yesterday, I got in a traffic jam. I had a head-on with the milkman. The traffic blues, the traffic blues, the traffic blues, the traffic matrimony she will choose. You see, I got those dresses.
Initially, creating the music was in the hands of Rick Chrome, who was 21 when he joined the group. He had no improv training, but he was a quick study.
Oh, and God, was Rick a find. The funniest man in the world is Rick Chrome, I swear.
And Rick Chrome is one of the great parodists of all time, you know. And a playful comedic mind when it comes to trying to find musical jokes.
Rick was succeeded by John McMahon, and even though John was more highly trained as a pianist than Rick, he too had no improv experience.
Like when I came in, I started really creating song formats for them.
My name is Harry. My anniversary was today. It's been so long, me and Renee. I'm filled with elation. It's the anniversary of our separation. She has both the kids. Little squirming yid.
Ronnie, I'm gonna shoot your tush. I wanna show you I'm George Bush. As they stood up, as they supped, as they supped.
In a show called Just Ain't a Party Without You. And Eddie was the accompanist, and Eddie was terrific, and he was a singer. He's sweet. And we auditioned Eddie, and hands down, I mean, you listen to Eddie play, and there's no question that you want him. And he was wonderful.
Well, Eddie was more of a Renaissance man. Eddie was more of a mainstream guy. So he liked pop, he liked Motown, he liked all those things, you know. And Rick's musical repertoire was limited, and John's was selective. And Eddie was an open book, bring it on, baby, whatever it is, you know. And out of all the musical directors we had, Eddie was certainly the guy who was the most locked into the moment, you know. And he was just such a charming guy. What a sweetheart. What a terrible loss.
The final element in George's playbook for success was scene work. What this meant was creating characters on stage who had a past and were involved in some major life-changing event. The scene was usually comic, but could also be serious.
But when we did sketches like that, it was like, well, you and I are doing this, so let's do this. And we would work it out. We would know what the beats were, we would know what the lines were, we would maybe change something, and then you would get mad at me because you were anticipating that I would say what I said yesterday that I didn't say tonight. You know what I mean?
I think the difference is between improv now and back when we came, we saw improv more as theater, and improv now is synonymous with comedy.
But the point is, our angle, our whole oeuvre, the belief was if it was really going to be funny, it had to be worth something. And if it was going to be funny, it was going to be funny because of the story we told, not because in the middle of it I went, well, for a nickel I will. What would happen with this phone call if? What does this phone call mean? What does reading that I have on the, that I met this rando person in a bar and I've got this number and I'm gonna call her, and then into his imagination what happens?
And our bodies. Oops! I dropped my glass.
Where he's on the phone call and he has, and he reinterprets this moment. It's not really Rashomon. It's three discrete fantasies, right? And I just thought that was just so elegantly constructed.
Hello? Hello, David. This is Susan. We met at a party a couple of days ago.
The one in the blue dress, right? I think I remember.
Good. Look, I was wondering if maybe we could get together tonight and see a movie or maybe have a drink.
Well, you know, it is kind of short notice. Have to change some plans.
Okay, forget it.
You know, it was a self-defeating moment, you know, which was like so precise about the human psyche, I thought.
When we improvise, people think you stand up on stage and create funny one-liners, and that's impossible. What you do is try to create real situations, and the humor comes out of those situations. But to get people to do that on stage is very difficult.
George's dream was coming true. Unfortunately, it was about to turn into a nightmare. George was riding high. Chicago City Limits had opened its second show, Nancy Get Your Gun, slamming the recently elected President Ronald Reagan with short scripted scenes, blackouts, and songs. For all its artistic success, however, Chicago City Limits was facing financial challenges. Money-wise, George was getting hammered. He had a wife and small child to support, and the theater's monthly rent wasn't cheap. There were also tensions forming in the group, which could have a negative impact on the performances of the cast members.
See, what had happened after the thing with John, right? What evolves, and this evolves in groups all the time, there was like a click, right? And I wasn't in it.
I remember at the time there was, you know, a lot of sensitivity with, you know, Bill's style, and you know, it was kind of a thing where I was an audience member, and like every other audience member were going, "Wow, Bill's the funny guy." I mean, you can say stylistically it wasn't a good match or whatever, but let me tell you, being an audience member, absolutely was funny. Whether it was, you know, the ingredient that George was looking for, you know, I can't speak to that. But this isn't a guy who is in any way, you know, lacking in the funny department.
And this is why I left the group. And it took a while for this to just fester and get worse and worse. I can't remember when it started, but you know, Carol and I always got special mention, right?
In reviews.
In reviews, right? And the thing is that the more I get a special mention, the worse things seem to get.
Bill had his own ways of doing things, and there was some headbutting. There had always been some headbutting with Bill.
There was definitely friction between Bill and the rest of the company in the early days, you know, of our first theater. He was a bit of an outsider, both socially and on stage. And there were times when you could even see it on stage, especially between Bill and George, that there was tension.
Let's bring out our first famous dead guest, a guy who cheered a lot of people up, who's going to cheer you up. I'm speaking of the inimitable Groucho Marx. Let's hear it for Groucho. Grab a mic, Grouch, and sit down. Well.
Is that you, Steve?
Oh, that's me,
Is that your face or did your pants fall down? Just kidding you, Steve.
Groucho.
Why a duck, I always say. Oh, my mustache.
It's really good to see you. It's good to have you on. I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions about your brothers.
Cheap prop.
Right. I'm going to be asking you why you chose that prop when we have mustaches. And I'm going to be asking you a lot of other things.
George also had to deal with Sammy Free Universe, their landlord with the strange name.
And he used to, Sammy would write, "Dear comedians."
Seeing the apparent success of the improv group, Sammy offered to extend CCL's 5-year lease by another 5 years, but he would also double the rent. George said no thanks, and the war with Sammy began.
And then Sammy moved on vacating the building completely, illegally.
Every city agency came down, the landlord called them in for violations, water violations, sanitation violations, fire violations, any violation you could have. And the coup de grace came where one day Chris and I come to the theater early and there's a padlock on the front door.
And when we were able to go in, which was through the fire escape, basically, we went in through the back to get our stuff, opened the front doors, and tried to get a few chairs, some costume props, looked around for paperwork. The whole place had been trashed. He had broken all the ashtrays and, that kind of stuff.
Months later, Chris and Paul, preparing to appear in a Chicago City Limits show at another venue, were visited by 2 plainclothes police officers.
Sammy Free Universe had claimed that we had stolen the space heaters that he had put in.
The detectives were taking Paul and Chris away, which was unbelievable in itself. Paul calls over his shoulder to me, "Call my father, we need a lawyer."
We're in the, again, in the holding tank. And everybody, there's a lot of bragging going on. It's not as scary as you'd think, but it is kind of scary.
In the morning, we get moved to the pre-arraignment holding cell, which was really like a Turkish prison. I mean, there's a toilet in the corner, and there's man, it was the steaming dregs of humanity.
This guy sitting next to me or Chris, and we kind of hardly even noticed him. And he's really somber, and he goes, "I've already killed tonight. I don't mind killing again. Shut up."
And everybody's handcuffed. Some people behind their backs and some people in front. And I'm watching this one guy who keeps taking his handcuffs on and off. I guess his wrists were near, I don't know. But it was just like, holy crap, where are we?
The 2 parties went to court, where Sammy's letters to George and George's replies were presented as evidence.
One of the funny things that George did, that I'll always remember, is that he wrote these formal letters to Sammy because he expected them to be used as evidence, but he used different versions of his name in the letters. So I know there was a letter that was addressed to, it was Sam, dear Mr. Sammy F.U. was one, and it actually came to be when we were in court. A couple of them were read out as evidence, and the Mr. Sammy F.U. was read out by the bailiff, which was kind of funny.
As the case dragged on, George became depressed. It looked like CCL would lose its theater.
The place was padlocked. We couldn't get in, so we started this era of diaspora where we were going from whoever didn't have a show on Theater Row, we would 4-wall their space, and whatever kind of rudimentary lighting they had and stuff, they would support us. They knew what was going on, that we were in the middle of a big landlord-tenant dispute. And so we were at the Samuel Beckett, then the Harold Clurman, then we were we ended up at the West Side Arts Theater right after Vanities.
And then the group found the perfect venue, the basement theater of the Jan Hus Church at East 74th Street.
We began our run at the Jan Hus Playhouse. George had negotiated that while we were still at the West Side Arts, because he knew that was going to run out. We had a finite window of when that was going to be. But we had a theater that had an expandable size. Jan Hus was beautiful because they had a lot of folding chairs, and it was just a matter of setting up as many folding chairs as you needed in a row. Because we went and bought some more for them at one point in time.
This is Jan Hus. It's being demolished, but there was the center of the stage over there. The lights were on stage left on that side. The piano is on the other side. It's a great stage, about 2.5 feet up, and this room holds about 300 people. It was a perfect place for an improv group.
A perfect space. But George would never appear in it. Because by February 1982, George Tedisco was dead.
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, first of all, he was like, you're not supposed to die when you're in your 30s.
I mean, who ever heard of such a thing? A 33-year-old guy? Was he 33? He was young, incredibly young. Had a 2-year-old kid, you know, and was healthy.
I talked to him on Christmas, and he was home, and he wasn't feeling well. He had a backache. And he said he was going to have to go and get that backache checked out because it was really quite painful. Well, when he got to the hospital the very next day, he was in kidney failure. He was in the hospital for a month, and he died February 2nd.
It was just the saddest thing that you can imagine. I mean, here was this guy who was at the peak of his creative life. Not even the peak. There was so much more that George could have done.
You know, he had a wife and a kid. And it was awful. I just remember, you know, for anything that I might have been upset with George about, or any, you know, flaws or things I wish he'd done, you know, to be taken, he was like 30 or something, you know, and he had a baby, a little, you know, it was, you know, it was so devastating.
His wife, you know, found some reportage about these medications that George had been taking, which had a lethal potential result. And they were idiosyncratic medications, and he was on both of them. And there was some discovery that was published in the paper, like, don't take these two things.
The death of George was devastating, but he had trained his troupe well. In life, as on the stage, the power of yes sustained them. Rather than being overwhelmed by the event, the group pulled out all the stops, staging a 24-hour marathon featuring the CCO troupe with Chris Oyen replacing George, as well as other improvisers, stand-up comedians, and celebrities. The profits from the event went to George's widow and son.
So we had that space, that big hole that George, can you imagine? That was a very hard role to fill, but Chris filled it. Chris is amazing. Chris always was amazing. And he came in there and just let it rip. And he had watched it and done stuff, you know, he knew how to improvise. I don't know if it was from osmosis or watching it or thinking about it, because he hadn't done it, not with the group, but man, he just came in and fit right in.
He shall have my head.
No, I won't let him. I will keep it upon thy neck always.
And he shall have my foot.
The group had survived and was ready to carry on George's dream. Paul and Chris became the producers. Besides the loss of George, there were two major changes that affected the dynamics of the group. Bill McLaughlin left Chicago City Limits to join the First Amendment, a downtown improv group, and David Regal, a performer George had handpicked for the touring company, was elevated to the main stage show.
My style was to just, you know, run into traffic, essentially. I'm going to run into the speeding traffic. I'll try not get hit, and we'll see what happens. And I think you have to do that with improv. You can't be tentative. You have to make choices, and you have to
be bold.
David Regal, Eddie Elner, Chris Oyen, and our anchor persons, Judy Nazametz and Paul Zuckerman.
You know, if you're out there watching TV tonight, it means that you probably have no friends. Our consumer reporter, David Regal, is going to show us how to make some friends even in this tough city of New York.
Hello, this is David Regal posing as a tourist in front of the world-famous Plaza Hotel. We're trying to find out if New Yorkers are indeed friendly. Come on. Pardon me, sir. I'm new in town and I'm looking for a friend.
Well, you've come to the wrong city.
The wrong city? New Yorkers aren't friendly?
No, not when they have a hot dog that they just dine to eat and don't want to be disturbed. So,
Okay, but we're still friends.
yeah, we're friends.
I'm looking for a friend.
Beat it.
Okay, here's a group. Of course, groups are normally more friendly than individuals.
I'll be your friend.
Thank you very much. Say, why don't we do something, okay?
If it ain't too kicky, if you ain't gay, you can
We are friends.
Friends are we.
Ha ha ha.
Hee hee hee.
That was fun, wasn't it? Thanks for being my friend. Now everyone together. We are friends.
Friends are we.
No, it's okay. We're friends.
I found out about Chicago City Limits because I was working as a house pianist in a pretty shitty nightclub in the Murray Hill section of New York. You know it was a shitty nightclub because I was the house pianist and I don't really play the piano. Someone said, oh, you should see this group, Chicago City Limits, they're funny. And I went to see them, their first show in New York, Dented, in Times Square, and it was fantastic. And shortly thereafter, for some reason, someone told them I played the piano a little, or I mentioned that I worked at the shitty nightclub. And they said, sometimes our reasonably good musician, Rick Rome, is absent. Could you be a fill-in pianist? Well, I don't really play the piano, but it didn't stop me at the nightclub. So I figured, why not?
The year George died also found the company, unexpectedly and delightfully, working with a comedy legend, Robin Williams.
The first time we saw Robin, he walked into the kitchen, which was kind of off the backstage area at the Jan Hus. And, you know, you look at him, wow, it's Robin Williams. He's here, and kind of said, hey, would you like to do a show with us? I mean, I assumed that's why he was here, and he kind of sheepishly nodded his head. And that was the beginning of maybe 20 to 30 shows that Robin did.
So I worked with him a lot because I knew how to support him, throw him lines, not try to get the jokes myself, but to go with wherever he was going. It was a riot, like working with Volcano. He was kind and sweet and very generous backstage. On stage, he was on fire.
All right. You make my heart beat, damn you.
And you make my heart beat also.
You steaming hunk of white trash. Never have I wanted a woman more in my life. Oh,
Get your hands off me.
Oh, Lord, I feel like drool on a dog's lip.
It's too bad you look like a pimple on a dog's butt.
Where did she get that line, Tom? Was that line in there, or did something come out of her bitchy self? What was that? Pimple on the dog's butt? I don't think Tennessee Williams wrote that, do you? It's no good. The kasha is not fresh. The kasha is not fresh, and the barley is rotten. Right. Which brings us to the first living wobbler. Right. And, of course, the shrunken head. Yes. The dirty socks I smell. Yes. 2 lines we did on the tape. But, what did we do the lines of? You didn't ask what we did the lines of. Everyone assumes it's cocaine. But therein lies the drift. Therein lies the fact that we have snorted Cruex. Brilliant, Holmes! Isn't it? Thus we will not get athlete's nose. Yes!
Oh, he's gone. Good. What we need right now is a suggestion that he doesn't hear. I would like you to think of obscure sayings, phrases, cliches, or proverbs. Stop running with that stick or else you'll poke your eye out. He's going to have to guess that based on the clues we give.
Wait, here comes another clue. I hear them.
we have the long album version here, Joe. Thank you. Thank you both. Something to do with stop. Yeah, that's the word. Stop, Rob.
Doesn't matter with me.
Watch that, Gerald. It's all there.
Stop the blinder running. Stop the blinder running. Stop the blenders running. Stop running. Ah, running. Yes. Stop running. Ah, when you can walk.
For the assembly, my name's Clinton. I'm the musical sort of act here for the assembly. You don't mind if I just rehearse just to get ready for the assembly?
All right, certainly.
I love you. You love me. Oh! Oh, my goodness. Oh!
You see what he just did? He blinded.
Oh, stop running blind.
How did he blind himself? Poking. Yes, poking.
Ah! Stop running with that stick.
Turn around quickly, Gerald.
Stop running with that stick and poke your eye out.
Oh!
No!
Stop.
Wait, I know what I know it now. Oh, stop running with that stick. You'll poke your eye out.
Yeah! When we did one-word stories, we would tell a story with each actor using one word at a time. Now, if an actor made any mistakes at all, the audience would get to yell, die. And we would do that a lot. And if you died, you would have to do a death.
I go for you.
No, what?
I did not say the word after you. Go, save yourself. Oh, I'd like to welcome you to Club Boom Boom. Thank you very much. Tonight's male go-go dancers, thank you for coming. I like that lovely strip number if we could, Tommy. Thank you for coming.
Woo!
Oh.
Yeah!
Good.
Robin Williams found us, we didn't find him. And the fact that he worked out with us, it validated us, at least I felt that way. Some part of you has to say, if he's choosing to work out with us, we can't be that bad. We've got to be okay at what we're doing because he keeps coming back.
Most of those involved with Chicago City Limits remember it as a special place in a special time.
When I was on stage with those people, I had no fear because I knew that whatever I did, they had my back.
It was just so much fun. I mean, it was just the laughter. We made each other laugh a lot.
I've always missed Chicago City Limits, and for a lot of reasons. Perhaps the most impactful reason is, I was young, comparatively young when I was in Chicago City Limits, and I didn't appreciate how rare the situation was.
Right, and I think over time, the world of improvisation has moved towards a more purely improvised approach. You remember, when we come to New York, there's First Amendment was there. I think there was something called the New York Improv Theater that kind of ended just about the time we came, but there was no real improv community besides that. We were creating it. They were creating it. So what you did was, there was no, oh, they do that, so I guess we should do that stuff. It was, let's do what we want to do.
Without that group, anything that I had done in New York in my professional career never would have happened. I may have ended up working at a Walmart or something.
And there isn't a single thing that I've done in my life that I planned. Really. I mean, it's just all kind of, okay, that door's, oh, let's go there, and I walked through those doors. That's what I did.
Now, we would have famous people show up every now and then at Chicago City Limits, and we would be, in awe of them. And they all said the same thing to us, independently of one another, that say, you don't know how lucky you guys have.
Improvisation is bigger than just the art form, and that anybody can do it. To want to instill people with confidence, with the courage that they need to get up there and do that, with the joy that there is of creating something from nothing, with the fact that we're all creative people at heart, even though many times we're blocked to that creativity. And that's one of the things that improvisation does. It blows open that concept. You can do this.
The dream that he had, which was to create this great improvisational ensemble that would show that improv was not, you know, this clunky, fails 60% of the time kind of dynamic, and it was a group of performers who were dedicated to doing that work and were making a living from it. That was realized.
George's vision for CCL was to be the best improv group that ever was, and I guess history will decide upon that. I think we're certainly on that short list, and I think we did that very well. I think George would have been pretty surprised to know that 35 years later the group was still around. I don't know if we had that kind of long-term thinking in our bodies at all, but I think we did it pretty good.
The fact that a superstar like Robin Williams would come back week after week to work with the 5 members of Chicago City Limits proved that George's relentless training had not been wasted. Indeed, George's life was a testament to his belief in the power of yes.
This is my story. It's sad but true. It happened to me, and I hope it don't happen to you. When I was a child, you know, life was happy. My folks were rich and they dressed kind of snappy. But I make my living going for yucks. My daddy says, honey, that isn't the way you're gonna make any bucks. I got the money, the money, the money blues. I got the money blues. Ooh, another career is one that I should try to choose. Maybe I can tell you.
Things are tough, things are hard. I don't work, I feel like a tough lord. I've been trying to get a job, but no one hires me, they say I'm a slob. So I sit home and just read the comics. I guess that's what you call Reaganomics. I got the money, the money, the money blues. I got the money, the money blues. I can't even afford to pay some union dues.
Hi everybody, my name is Rita.
Hi, Rita.
I make my money by walking the street. I tell ya, I have lots of fun. And sometimes I even get a few yucks. I met a guy who was tall and slim, but he fooled me, honey. He made me pay him. I got the money, the money blues. I got the money, blues. Oh yeah. Well, then I had to put on my walking shoes.
Recently I was stuck in jail. I had to raise a lot of bail. A certain substance caused me pain. It was a drug called cocaine. Now I am an unhappy man. You see, my name is John DeLorean. The money blues. I got the money blues. Oh yeah, harmless placebo is something I should have used. I used to be a very rich guy. I didn't have to do nothing just to get by. Well, lately things haven't filled me with elation because of all this lousy inflation. Well, I tell you, when I get hungry, I go to the closet. All I got to eat are my certificates of deposit. I got the money, the money, the money blues. I got the money, the money blues. Put your money in a bank and baby, you're gonna lose.
If you miss having some dough,
Get a job. That's a place where you can go. Work real hard.
earn those bucks. Get yourself a job.
Or you'll be out of luck.
Yeah.
You'll be solvent. You'll be happy.
Otherwise, honey, your life will be crappy.